Hi, my name's Neil Jameson. I'm the founder and Emeritus Director of Citizens UK. A lot of people in Northern Ireland say, why are we not Citizens Northern Ireland? That's many reasons for that, but if I explain firstly what Citizens UK is, and then in a way it's up to you, the viewer, as to whether or not you invite us to Northern Ireland, because we go nowhere where we're not welcome, preferably because we've been invited. So 30 years ago, I set up Citizens UK, and it's now the home of community organising in the United Kingdom. Apologise, not obviously in Northern Ireland yet, but that's not my fault, frankly. That's more the possibility of being invited there, as I say. The purpose of Citizens UK is to develop people's capacity to participate in public life and to strengthen their institutions in the process. Citizens UK is a charity that's charitable to develop people's capacity to participate, as it is charitable to strengthen civil society institutions. We've learned a lot in the last 30 years, and so we're very specific about the way we organize. We only organize people in groups. We think people in groups are safer, they're more reasonable, they have to negotiate with the group before they come up with their ideas and so on. And frankly, these groups, which we particularly focus on, are vital to how people learn how to do democracy, frankly. They are the pillars of a democracy. They're imperfect, but nevertheless the best we've got. And that includes faith institutions, trade union branches, voluntary associations, LGBT groups, preferably if there's some sort of constitution, there's some way of removing the leader. For instance, some sort of democracy takes place within the organization. Those are even better groups, frankly. We have now got an alliance in the United Kingdom, apart from Northern Ireland, of 500 such institutions in membership of Citizens UK. That makes us quite powerful. The purpose of Citizens UK is to help the members be more powerful. It is my experience and the experience of many of our members, which is that power is the determining factor between winning and losing an issue. If you want to change society, if you want to change society dramatically, systemic change, then you've got to have power. The power we talk about is the power of organized people with their organized money. So another principle of Citizens UK is that we don't take money from the state. We do take money from our members, the member institutions, not the individuals. No individual can join, but the groups pay. And what they pay for is very sophisticated because it's been going a long time. And actually aspects of the training we do go back to the ancient Greeks. So we do residential training, we do evening training, a whole series of training into how to be an effective organization, an effective citizen, an effective leader in the 21st century. So many people have called Citizens UK a university of the streets. We are not a university, but we are a learning opportunity. It gives our membership a learning opportunity as to how to be more effective leaders, how to develop their own institutions so it's up to date and it develops and does things that our members want it to do, so it's relevant to their lives. And then we focus on the issues of the membership. We start with building power. A little mantra we use is power before program. I spent 20 years, I used to work for Save the Children Fund and for the Children's Society, and I was a community worker and a social worker. And it took me 20 years to understand that actually you don't start with the issue. It's not helpful in the long run because people are multi-issue, they have all sorts of concerns. Better to start with power. As I say, the more power you have, the more dramatic you can be and more effective you can be, and the better the leader you would be if you have this important quality, which frankly the corporations and the private sector fully understand, the state fully understands it, but often civil society folk are worried about this word power. Power means possibly, the dictionary definition is the ability to act. It's a fairly harmless thing. It's neutral. Obviously, it can be used for good and for ill, but frankly, the people together in an alliance with some form of accountability, therefore, which is why the money is important, can be very powerful. Evidence of that we will come to shortly. So Citizens UK, home of community organising, not taking money from the state, developing people, leaders and their institutions, only having groups in membership, has given us this experience, which is extremely positive experience, of how when we organise around things that all our members can agree on, it is possible to change things dramatically. Change systems, change attitudes, change ways of living, frankly. Which is why I hope you will be convinced by this this lecture, this agitation, to invite me or Citizens UK and Citizens UK to come and work with you to see if we can build together a Citizens in Northern Ireland, not taking money from the state. Our budget is £5 million. Half of that money comes from membership dues, which are paid every year. If the members don't get what they want, they drop out of membership. And that affects the salary of the organisers. We have 50 professional organisers who depend upon the money from the membership. That's why they are extremely accountable. Frankly, if you take money from the state or you just take money from foundations, to a certain extent, you're accountable to where that money comes from, of course, which is why we are very strict about the money comes from the membership. If the membership don't like the performance of the organizer or the values or the intention or the ambition of the local group or the local citizens group, then naturally the membership leave. That's a very powerful way of holding people accountable. Let's come then to what do we do when we have actually set up such an organization, which is that we then spend some time listening to the membership. In Northern Ireland, what we would need would be, I feel like, an umbrella body called Citizens Northern Ireland, and then that body decides where are we going to build a local alliance. Citizens' work is primarily local. The work we do, because it involves developing people and their local rooted institution, is focused on the local. That could be Derry, it could be Belfast, it could be another part, it could be a rural part, it could be Antrim. It's really up to the membership to decide by where do most people want to this exciting adventure of building power and then acting together on the same values they have on the issues that they are worried about. So let's say the group chooses Belfast, and we would then work together to build a Belfast Citizens. What you would need, therefore, is some money on the table to pay for 2 years of a community organizer who effectively you appoint in conjunction with Citizens Northern Ireland. They would be your organizer. Their job is to do lots of one-to-one meetings in order to see who are the actors and the players and the makers of things that happen in order to build an alliance around their institutions. The institutions need to be diverse, there's no question. The Muslim community needs to be included. The Chinese community needs to be included. Diversity is critical to the power that you need to have. It cannot be all white folk or black folk or young people. It needs to be, the more diverse the alliance, the better. It may take about 18 months to do that. And by the time the alliance is built and has got a diverse membership of people who've pledged to work together for the common good, then a big assembly would be held, which would launch the platform or the manifesto of the Belfast Citizens Alliance. And that platform is basically up to the Belfast members to decide what the things are that they want to work together on. In the process, of course, before that happens, important to do what we call a power analysis. Who are the people that the organization needs to be in relationship with in Belfast? Who are the power brokers of the capital city of Northern Ireland? And then in the process, the members, as they grow, will meet with those people to do what we call one-to-one meetings, which is not to say we want money or we want you to do something we want you to do, but basically it's to say, hello, I am, and you are, and tell us about yourself, and we'll tell you a bit about us. And thank you very much for what you're doing. And I'll explain a bit what the organization's intention is, which is to develop people's capacity to participate in public life, but also, of course, to strengthen the institutions in the process. One of the problems for many local civil society organizations is they're not very relevant to people's lives, which is partly why they're losing numbers. In many cases across the West, these old institutions, which once were so critical to people's life because they were not family, but they were the next stage. In America, they call these mediating institutions, have lost numbers. Church is losing numbers. The trade unions are losing numbers. Membership tends to be either hedonistic, like gyms, or cultural societies and so on, rather than rooted institutions which work together for, often specifically, for something called the common good. That's why we only work with institutions. To give you an example, when I was party to the start of London Citizens, which is the biggest alliance, the issues that came from the membership surprised us. I thought the issues would be, and certainly that's what the leaders of the group thought, the issues would be issues to do with poverty or to do with jobs, well-paid jobs. In reality, the only thing people could agree with, which is quite important, was the cost of funerals was very high, and also there was a bad smell in Canning Town in Newham. So the first actions we took were to correct the smell by working out where it came from and how to stop it, and then to make sure that the funeral costs, which had escalated for some reason, this was in 1994, 1995, were contained somehow. That involved the membership doing some homework and going to meet people and doing some study. And obviously the presence of Google makes all that much easier than it used to do. Cut a long story short, another example which is relevant for yourselves, is that in 5 years, 6 years later, the membership were really having quite a good time and winning various campaigns and growing in the process, of course, and keeping diverse, and also had extended from East London to South London, where there was a citizens organisation there too, with ambitions to move to West London as well, each one of them being sort of chapters of the Alliance. Said the issue for us is work. People don't have enough time to spend with their children, and their wages are going down rather than up. That means they can't plan ahead. 0-hour contracts are coming in. They need to be able to plan to take their little boy to the football or their little girl somewhere else, or to the football as well. But basically, the issue turned out to be work. And that's where the principle and the ambition and the audacity of the citizens group was, okay, why don't we set a living wage? The living wage was set by the membership. Its purpose was to make sure that parents spent time with their children, had more time to spend with their children, and to try and contain the aggressiveness of work effectively, which of course without any rules, and there aren't that many rules, would work people to the bone. What happened then? Big assembly, big launch, living wage, then targeting various employers successfully to pay this wage, which was £2 more than the minimum wage. And to cut a long story short, we won significant battles, firstly with hospitals and then with the private sector, particularly with HSBC Bank and then Barclays Bank and others. So we created the precedent of people paying this wage. When the phrase living wage became more popular and better known, there are now 6,000 employers, not that many in Northern Ireland, who are accredited living wage employers. This is the real living wage, not the government's recently called national living wage. That's effectively the minimum wage. And this came from the membership. It came from an organized, powerful, intelligent, thoughtful group of people who, with all of their members, the members of the churches and the mosques and schools and so on, were able, when necessary, to turn out very large numbers, not in a demonstration, but in an assembly, a controlled assembly in a building which big enough to make sure that the targets of the alliance listened to the arguments for better wages and ideally agreed to pay them. Boris Johnson, coincidentally, when Mayor of London, was a great champion, but of course so was Ken Livingstone before that. Both of them led the way, and they would only give contracts for TfL and other organizations which were their responsibility to people that committed to paying
this real living wage. So those are three examples: funerals and smelly factories and better wages. There are many, many, many more, because within the life of the organization, it is possible to do several actions at the same time, several targets, several ambitions, because the membership is significantly large, varied, and has an appetite for public action. We say that action is the oxygen of a good citizens organization. That doesn't mean reading about it, it means doing stuff. It means getting a relationship with the people who have the power to work with you together to achieve the objectives of the organization. I hope that's encouraging you. I haven't said what the issues would be in Northern Ireland, because that's up to you. And what we have is a structure and a history. And if you look on the Citizens UK website, it's mostly on there. There are citizens groups now in most urban areas of England and Wales, and growing in Scotland. We hope Citizens Scotland will be launched next year with the same process, the same discipline, the same experience, the same membership, the diverse membership paying their dues, acting together within the law. There's lots you can do within the law that can lead to significant change if you have large numbers of organized people who are prepared to do that and stand shoulder to shoulder with people, even if their issue is not their issue. That's very important, that we basically need to recognize solidarity of a very important principle, as is fraternity, that we work together on the issues that matter to us, because you never know when the virus is going to strike. You never know when the bomb is going to go off. So one reason why Citizens has had members in membership for 25 years in London is it's like an insurance cover. You're in membership, and when things go wrong, the membership turns out. When the bombs went off in London in 2007, then we were ready for them to a certain extent, because very quickly the organization came together, particularly around the East London Mosque, to protect, defend, and sustain the members of that mosque, who at the time were being attacked by the far right, even though the mosque had nothing to do with any negative activity. So we organize for the good times and the bad times. You can't just organize for the good times, because you never know when, as now with the coronavirus, you will need neighbors who you know, who you can rely on, who are in sympathy with the organization, not necessarily, of course, in sympathy with the ideology of the organization, because we're not all Muslims, we're not all Christians, we're not all Protestants, but sympathy because we know each other as human beings. It's the human beings bit which is so important, and because we've stood shoulder to shoulder on issues which we've won on in the past. And that's why we need to be organized on a permanent basis. Citizens builds permanent alliances of institutions which are strengthened by the process, attract new members because their institution is doing stuff and is active and is teaching and developing leaders, of course, and is therefore in the public realm, is known, particularly, if you like, at election time. So every time there's a significant election, like the Mayor of London, although that has been postponed, of course, this time because of the virus, we have large assemblies of our members who've spent a year or two building up a brief manifesto of requests that we would like the mayoral candidates to consider and commit to at the Mayoral Accountability Assembly. The last time this happened in 2016, London Citizens had 6,000 people in a room to meet with the two significant candidates who were standing for election at that time, and get them primarily to say they would work with the organization on the issues that had been presented to them. These assemblies are unique in British public life because they're bringing together diverse people. There is music in them, there is celebration in them, and there is hard-nosed politics taking place, primarily to get the working relationship with a person who can deliver on the very things the organization wants to act on. So I hope that encourages you. If you want to see a video of the launch of the Tyne and Wear Citizens Organization, it is possible that could be played after I have finished talking, which is in a minute, because that will give you an idea. This is not a new idea. Organising people goes back to the Ark, effectively. It is something that has a long tradition in Northern Ireland. People have organised always for change. Organised people get things done, disorganised people get very little done. So that's another principle for us. Another thing we say is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And boy, are most of us on the menu. And particularly, of course, now, where the state is having to increase its power and its muscle to make sure that the virus is seen off and that the economy survives. So ideally, that should be done in a relationship with a strong organisation in Northern Ireland, where we work together when there's a crisis, and when there is no crisis, there are always targets and activities and issues which we can work together to improve. So I wish you every success. I hope that you have been encouraged by this, and possibly by looking at the website, and I encourage you to see the Tyne and Wear Citizens Launch, which tells the story going back a long way of organising in the Northeast, and now the new model, which is built upon the old experience of Tyne and Wear citizens, arrived 2-3 years ago, has been very active, has united the cities of Newcastle with Sunderland and Durham, and everybody said it couldn't be done because the football teams hate each other. It is perfectly possible to do that if you don't talk about football, of course. We talk about the issues, about the great tradition of organising in the Northeast, and then we can work out what we can do together and then go and do it. Thank you for your patience and your interest. I wish you every success and hope to hear from you very soon.
The North East has a strong history of radical action in the cause of social justice, not accepting our fate but organising and struggling for change. In the 19th century, men and women from across the region worked together for the right to vote, with mass protests through the cities and political meetings held in cafes and led by the Chartists, including George Binns from Sunderland. People from our region, such as Joseph Cowan from Newcastle and James Field Stansfield from Sunderland, were leaders in the anti-slavery movement. With public meetings, boycotts of products and runaway slaves welcomed into people's homes. The freed slave Frederick Douglass, who lived for a time in Newcastle, expressed a key principle of community organising when he said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will." In the 1930s, local people from South Shields, especially conscientious white sailors, stood shoulder to shoulder with Arab sailors, supporting their struggle for employment rights and equal job opportunities on the Tyne. The Durham March in 1936 saw more than 200 men walk to London with their MP, Ellen Wilkinson, to protest against the closure of the shipyards in Sunderland and on the Tyne. These people were fighting for their jobs, their dignity, their wages, and against poverty. Alongside shipbuilding, coal mining was at the heart of the industrial landscape of the North East for generations. Politically, the miners' strikes of the 1980s challenged the traditional roles of Durham women and changed the politics of the North East women's lives. To this day, the annual Durham Miners' Gala is probably the most significant gathering of workers anywhere in Europe. We have always been a welcoming community to people fleeing for their lives. In the 1930s, we welcomed children fleeing the Spanish Civil War. Today, we welcome young people escaping the horror of war in Syria. Last year, Tyne and Wear Citizens welcomed the first child refugee from Calais to the North East. In our own age, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks called on us to join the ongoing struggle against racism and poverty, and both of them were trained in the method of community organising used today by Citizens UK. The story of Tyne and Wear Citizens began in January 2014 with a conference on developing a stronger voice at the Centre for Life in Newcastle. Citizens UK were invited to make a presentation and over 150 people attended the event. Impressed by the opportunity to reweave the fabric of civil society, several people agreed to meet monthly with community organisers from Citizens UK with the aim of forming a local-based alliance. In December 2015, over 100 people packed the Mining Institute to celebrate the North East's history of protest and struggle, and to recognise the generous support of the founding partners of Tyne and Wear Citizens. which are the Roman Catholic Diocese of Hexham and Newcastle, the Anglican Diocese of Durham, the Institute of Social Renewal and the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences of Newcastle University, the Newcastle Quakers and the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle. In October 2016, we appointed our first community organiser, Sarah Bryson, who works to develop leaders within our member organisations and grow the power of our alliance through the organised action we take around key issues. Member institutions are drawn from a broad base of civil society, education, faith groups and community organisations. It is their membership dues, together with the support of our partners, that pays for the community organiser and the leadership training programmes. In May 2017, we launched our first listening campaign. Over the summer we had over 1,900 face-to-face conversations with people in schools, church halls, community centres and mosques to identify the everyday problems people are facing in Tyne and Wear. These issues were discussed and voted on at our Delegates Assembly in September, when more than 160 representatives of all 27 member organisations met to decide on our agenda for action. The Assembly chose 3 issues to campaign on: mental health, hate crime and poverty. Since then, action teams have worked to refine our issues into winnable asks to put to the relevant decision makers at our launch assembly. We, the people of the North East, have had to fight for all our modern gains. We have many battles ahead, but we need to be organised. Tyne and Wear Citizens is bringing a broad alliance together to fight for social justice and the common good. Welcome to the launch of Tyne and Wear Citizens.